Baruchem Aboyim B'Shem Hashem. Shem Egen Shir Torah. Moses Boston. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's shir from Rabbi Yisroel Grossberg. I'd like to be a shekayach to Aaron Wolfson for sponsoring tonight's shir. Lili Nishmas Oviv, Reb Zev Ben Rav Avrom, Rav Shalom Nagel the Yortzeit. I'd also like to be a shekayach to Moti Zilberberg for support for tonight's shir in honor of Rabbi Grossberg and Lili Nishmas Aaron Avner Ben Menachem Alevi and Haisha Henya Bas Reb Yaakov Yehuda Aleim HaSholem. I have the great schus of sponsoring a shir or to help support Egen Shir Torah, especially now in light of our upcoming annual dinner, which is 2 weeks from tonight, Monday, August 17th. We put an ad in the journal in honor of any of the Rabbanim whose shiurim we've enjoyed, either in the summer or throughout the year, and help v'chelik in the Habatas HaTorah worldwide of Egen Shir Torah throughout the year. Call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. I'll have to cover the call on Rabbi Yisroel Grossberg, noted mechanech, to speak on how to bring your children closer in today's challenging times.
Thank you, Rabbi Deutsch. Special thanks, of course, to Egen Shir Torah, to Rabbi Bald, who this year, I guess, gave up. For the last 3-4 years, he's been asking me, please, not to thank him publicly, and I've managed not to listen to him one of those times. So this time I get to do it. It's not as much fun going because I do it against what he wants, because I just feel that we have an achrayus as a community, really to thank Egen Shir Torah and those people that are the sponsors, and really the organization for helping us that we have these beautiful shiurim. So I'd like to be medayik in the title for tonight's shir. The title is Bringing Kids Closer. It's not how to change children. It's not how to make children do what you want them to do. And I gotta be honest, I would probably not be the right person because I still haven't figured out necessarily the key to how to change children or how to make them do exactly what you want to do. But we can figure out perhaps how to bring them closer. And I think ultimately we're all better off if our goal becomes how to bring a child closer and not how to change a child. Children have a nature. They have natiyas towards certain things. This has been since Ma'aseh Bereishis. It's not up to us to change that nature, and not only that, we often fall on our face when trying to do so. It's up to us to figure out how we can take the nature of a child and use it in a productive manner. It's a little difficult sometimes because we have a system that's a little bit narrow in terms of what we have to fit into, but it shouldn't change our ability to really to help our children to grow, to steig, and to really be the best they can be. I'd like to also say that, realistically speaking, when we talk about our children, so I'm not going to go around the room and ask how many people here are parents, grandparents, etc., but I think Bizman Hazeh, we live in a time where we are all mechanchim, and everyone has the ability to help and change a child's life. I'll go take it a step further, that I believe a neighbor, a friend, a co-mispowel sometimes can be more matzliach than a parent. There's a certain feeling that a child maybe has when it comes to a parent. Perhaps they feel that, there's a little bit of a sichsuch between the two. It's a lot easier when it comes from a relative. And therefore, regardless of whether this is for your own children, this is something that we as a community can do to help the children that not only, this is not necessarily for children that are struggling. I think we make a mistake sometimes. I used to work with girls that were, they had the term at risk. And I remember one of them telling me, he said, Rebbe, at risk was like 2 years ago. Why do they still call me at risk? I'm like beyond risk now. We really don't deal with a child when they're at risk. At risk means that that's the time to come in and do something about it. Usually we use that term when it's already a little bit later. So let's talk about the child who we can help, bring them back on track so that they don't go in that direction. So I think, Kaidem Kol, we have to come to terms with the fact the world as we know it has changed. That can mean so many different things, whether it be technology, whether it be just, I mean, I have to be honest with you, I just remember thinking to myself, listening to one of the last presidential debates and thinking that if my children spoke the way those two candidates spoke, I probably would send them to sleep without supper. These are the people who, quote unquote, are the future potential presidents. The world has changed. Acceptable behavior has changed. The street has changed. And therefore, if we're still going with, when I was your age, I walked to school, everyone adds a mile and makes it a little bit colder and another foot of snow, and expect that our children are going to do the same thing, we're not necessarily going to be successful that way, because things have changed. I remember a number of years ago, they brought the Yeshiva of Aaron Leib Steinman Zatzal to a Torah Masorah convention for Q&A. And at the convention, someone had asked him, can a Rebbe play ball with his children, with his Talmidim? And Rabbi Aaron Leib said no. He said, really, there should be covered for a Rebbe, and when a Rebbe plays ball with the Talmidim, it kind of loses that covet. My heart sank. I play ball pretty much every day with my Talmidim. One of the chesronos of going into girls' chinuch was there when that. All my exercises down the tubes. But so what was I supposed to make of this when the Gadol Hadar says that that's not what we're supposed to be doing? So the next morning, I was zeicher to be learning with Rav Shimon Ulster Zatzal, and I asked him, I said, what am I supposed to make of this? And he said something very interesting. He said, if someone is a doctor out in the middle of Tennessee, or somewhere out in the middle of I don't know, someone from Tennessee is going to be insulted, so I got to be careful. But out in the middle of, the boondocks, and the hospital doesn't really have all of the machinery, the technology, the advancements that a Manhattan hospital has. He said it's important to understand how they do it in Manhattan as well, even if you're not able to do it by you, because you need to know how it looks when it's at its best and in its purest form. You may not be able to do that because of a situation where you are, and that's understandable. But still, it's always good to know and to have the goal and to the understanding of how it looks when it's at its best. Could be in Bnei Brak, they don't need to play ball with their Talmidim. Could be in Flatbush, they do. But it doesn't mean that it's right, a question of right or wrong, but more of that you have to know where you are. So we have to understand that it isn't one size fits all. Like we said, things have changed. Rav Wolbe Zatzal writes in a sefer, there's a sefer that puts together letters that he wrote. I can quote it. Gam hasaba mislabotka. Now, the Alter von Slabodka was not someone who we would call a modern-day, cutting-edge mechanech, simply because, not that he wasn't cutting-edge, but he definitely wasn't modern-day. Hasaba mislabodka atzmoi shina b'sof yomav. At the end of his days, he changed as darko, his way of dealing with Talmidim, min hakotza el hakotza, from one side to the next, meaning he completely did a turnaround. Kasher nishal al shinui zeh, when he was asked about it, he quoted the pasuk in Zechariah, where the pasuk in Zechariah talks about, while taking care of the tzayin, right, the shepherd sometimes will use, he says, ve'ekach li shnei maklos, le'echad karosi noam, le'echad karosi chayvolim. That there are two sticks that are used to get the sheep in order. One is called noam, is sweetness, and one is called where chavolim, where he actually goes and gives them, petch. The Metzudas David explains that in every situation, there's two ways to do things. The Alter Slabodka said, at his time, already then, the chavolim no longer worked, and he only used the makel shel noam, the sweet way of treating Talmidim. If you'd like to pause now and call your high school principals, okay, you don't have to do that. But understand that maybe there was a time where we had, again, and it's not necessarily a good thing that it's changed, but we're not here to discuss if it's good or bad. We're discussing the reality, the facts on the ground, and where Talmidim and Talmidos are holding and what they currently need. So how can we help a child hold on when the struggle begins? How can we see where they're at, meet them where they're at, and try to give them the backbone, the ability to work on through an issue without falling apart. You know, there's the famous mashal, I've heard it said over from Chelm. I don't want to take away from the Chelmers. If it was from them, I've heard it from other sources as well. But there was a town that had a beautiful ledge that people would look over at the mountains. But what was happening was people got so taken in by the scenery that sometimes they would fall over. So they decided this is getting dangerous. They built a hospital on the bottom. This way, God forbid, anyone falls, there's a hospital. Finally, now sounding like Chum, right? Finally, one guy said, why don't we just build a gate? We have a lot of hospitals sometimes after people have fallen. We need to build the gate. We need to create a situation that nobody falls. How do we do that? Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says three very, very powerful ideas in this area that I think if we really can take them to heart and bring them into our own lives, we can really change the way we look at not just our own children, grandchildren, etc., but really at children in general. In Shmuel Aleph, Perek Tes, Pasuk Lamed, Shaul HaMelech has, if we could use the word messed up, 2 different times. First, he brought a carbon too early that he wasn't supposed to bring. And secondly, he didn't kill Melech Agog that he was supposed to kill. And Shmuel comes to him and tells him that his melucha is over. Shaul, you had your chance, but because of the different things that you did not follow properly, there's going to be an end to your melucha. Shaul understands that what he did was wrong and understands that this is indeed the way it's supposed to be. But he says something very interesting to Shmuel. Kabdeini no neged ziknei ami v'neged Yisroel v'shuv imi. Be mechabed me in front of other people and walk out with me. Is this a covered thing? Is Shaul worried that people are going to hear, like word's going to get out that you heard Shaul HaMelech lost his melucha, he lost his shtela, you know, and someone else is going to become Rebbe now? Like, what was he exactly was he worried? Why did he want Shmuel to come with him? Shaul understood something that we all need to understand. Kol zman that everyone believes in me, I can believe in myself. As soon as they start treating me differently, that's when I lose faith in myself. When we believe in a child, even if they don't deserve it, that's the best way to make sure that they will feel secure and will hopefully get back on track. But when we make them feel that they're a lost cause, when we make them feel that they've left what they're supposed to be doing, that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Shaul HaMelech said, let everyone think I'm still in the game. I'm not, but that's not important for me right now to be able to function as Melech until as Kol Zman that I'm still Melech. If people believe in me, I can still continue to do the role that I'm set out for. More than the Aveira, the loss of personal identity is the problem. And I tell parents all the time, no one should have to go through it. But if you're thinking maybe your child is a Machal Shabbos, don't catch them. What do you gain by that? You're going to give them Musar? I can pretty much be sure the child is not going to look at you and say, oh, thank you. You know, I thought I was supposed to use that phone on Shabbos. I'm glad you clarified that for me. No, that's not what's happening. But once you've identified them and called them a Machal Shabbos, okay, now I'm Machal Shabbos. That's who I am now. On the other hand, if you can make them feel they're still part of the mishpacha, they're still part of everyone that does everything right, they can slide back into where they were, and no one is the wiser. We all know we act in the way we see ourselves, and we often see ourselves the way others see us. Not going to go into now, everyone has, sometimes, I should say everyone, Baruch Hashem, I don't mean to talk negatively about Mechanchim, but there's stories of people that, Mechanch said, you're never going to amount to anything, you're never, whatever, etc. You want to go around the room? No, I'm not going to do that. But it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. As soon as we lose our sense of belonging, we lose our sense of hope. And it goes one step worse. We choose then to belong somewhere else because we're accepted somewhere else. Yes, it almost seems counterintuitive. We're going to accept someone who's doing the wrong thing. And the answer is yes, we're going to. Because that acceptance ultimately is what's going to help them. And I'll tell you something, someone showed me an article in an Israeli newspaper they went to Ben Yehuda, where people hang out, and they interviewed teenagers who were clearly struggling with their Yiddishkeit. And they said the hardest thing is the rejection. Now, think of that for a moment. You're doing the rejection, right? That's logical. Let's please not inject logic into a totally illogical situation. Because if you want to be logical, you got the wrong thing. Parenting is not for the logical, right? You made this decision to leave. But they, and one of the girls said, Ani Charediya, I'm still a Charedi. Sure, don't look that way, but that's how she felt. But when you told her she isn't, okay, what am I supposed to do? The rejection sometimes is the hardest part, and the rejection is what pushes people over the edge. Like we said, the title tonight is bringing them close. It's not about changing them, but by bringing them close, what are we trying to do? We're playing what we call the end game. Our goal over here is not to make that tomorrow something's different. It's that this child will grow up and be a successful Frum Yid. And sometimes there are some stops along the way. I have to be honest, I remember, so I was in Menahel in Bnos Chai Academy, BCA. It was Rabbi Yisroel girls' high school for girls that were really struggling. And when I started, my goal was, I'm going to make everybody Frum. About 24 hours later, I realized that wasn't happening. And I learned I'm going to try to make everyone healthy and happy. And I got news for you. The Yiddishkeit falls in by itself. These are Frum girls from Frum families. It's not like they have to be taught. We don't have to bring them and make them Bali Jews. They know already. If we can just make them healthy, happy people, and make them feel accomplished, and make them feel good about themselves, I'm not saying it's not magic. And a halavai, I wish it was that simple, make them healthy and happy, buy a lollipop and everyone's Frum again. Not that simple. But the start is when we make them feel you're not different. Famous Maisa with a big mashkiach, not important to mention the name, but he was known, he had a son who was off. And the way he treated that son, I know a friend of mine was at the Shabbos table. The son walked in. It was relatively clear from the car keys that either he came by motorcycle or car, however he came. And his father asked him specifically, which Yom Zeh Mechubad should we sing? Which niggin do you like better? Come on. Yom Zeh Mechubad, this guy, he came by car. But no. In his mind, he treated him the same like everyone else. This same person once gave a shmooze in the mirror in Yerushalayim. And this son came along. Instead of being embarrassed, he had him sit up front. And a friend of mine told me that on the way out, he heard him saying, "No, did I say good? Do you think I said right?" He's looking at his son who was wearing, in my friend's words, some sort of interesting fringe. This goes back to the hippie days. Won't go into, he had a certain sweet smell about him. Right there in the middle of the mirror. And instead of being embarrassed, he asked him, "Do you think I said good?" And the boy came back. Again, it's not magic. I'm not saying this, halavai, every story had these wonderful happy endings. But there's no question, this father's belief in his son was something that got him there. Shaul HaMelech teaches us, yes, I'm in trouble. Yes, I'm losing the melucha. But don't make me feel chutz lamachem. Chaim Shmulevitz weiter brought down a medrash. It's a famous medrash. We know Ruvain was the shevet that went to try to save Yosef. Why? Was it a responsibility of being the older brother? Was he just nicer than everyone else? What was it about Ruvain that he decided that he wanted to save Yosef? There's a medrash that says that Ruvain lived with tremendous guilt over the aveira that he had done. He moved the father's bed, mother's bed. He got involved in family life that was not his business. He got it over the head, and there was a tremendous sense of guilt. Or, if we want to put it in words to maybe from what we're talking about now, a tremendous sense of not belonging because of the aveira that he did. When Yosef gave over his dream, he said there were 12 shvatim that bowed down to me. And Ruvain said, wait, I am part of the shvatim. I am one of the 12. Thank you, Yosef. Through your dream, you let me know I'm not chutz lamachne. You let me know that I am one of the crowd. The hakaras hatoiv that Ruvain felt for that, after going through so much time of feeling left out, was huge. And therefore, the Medrash says, Ruvain went looking for him. And I have news for you. the children very often will not show their appreciation, very often fakert. They'll even make fun, they'll joke around, etc. Parent told me, they called their child and said, before Pesach, what type of wine do you want? I usually buy everyone what type of wine they want for different cases. What type of wine do you want? The child was beside them. It's such a small, simple thing. He wasn't even sure at that point if he was going to be at the Seder. Then he decided he was going to be at the Seder. Because his father called him like he called every other child, every other time. A father that buys a lulav and esrog for a child that may or may not use it. It's an investment. If they don't end up using it, I'm sure you find someone else that can. If they do, the message you're giving them is huge. We are saying to the child, you will always be part of us. And sometimes they push. We all know that. Again, I'm not trying to make this sound like, include them in the crowd and they'll come running saying, thank you, this is what I want. But the question we always need to ask ourselves, it's not about right now. Right now, maybe this makes no sense. Asking Machal Shabbos, which Yom Zeh maybe makes no sense. It's not about today. We're playing the end game. We're playing, I think in the sports it's called the long game. Or if we want to talk about which pitcher you put in, at what point, you save your better pitcher for late. I should stop talking about things I don't know that much about. But the important point over here is that what we're saying that I believe, and regardless of where things are now, we're going to be okay. And we said it doesn't have to be logical. The Gemara talks about David's relationship with Avshalom. Without going into great detail, Avshalom was not the greatest guy. One of David's sons who did tremendous immorality. He was a horror show. He tried to overthrow his own father. What does that father do at Avshalom's death? David mourns with the words, Avshalom b'ni, Avshalom my son. Would anyone blame David HaMelech if he said, whew, okay, he was a really tough one. Avshalom b'ni. And the Gemara says, he cried 8 times, 7 times to take him out of Gehenna, and 1 time to get him into Gan Eden. This is David HaMelech crying for a son who gave him no end of tsar, who clearly was not someone who behaved appropriately. And yet, he still davened for him. Why? Because of the simple words, Avshalom b'ni. And interestingly, Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, I heard this from numerous Talmidim, when everyone would go to Kever Rachel, he would go to Yad Avshalom. I never thought it was a little strange. Okay, Mama Rachel, we all understand. A lot of good songs about it. You don't hear too many songs about Avshalom. Right? Why did he go to Yad Avshalom? Because he would cry to the Rebbeinu Shalom and say, if David could be a parent who could accept a child under those circumstances, Rebbeinu Shalom, can't you accept us? If David HaMelech cried Avshalom b'ni, can you understand Klal Yisroel b'ni? And that was Reb Chaim Shmulevitz saying that no matter how bad things get, a parent never rejects a child. Now, that doesn't mean a parent has to approve of everything the child is doing, just to clarify. Right? This is not saying just approve everything and they're going to come back and everything's going to be okay. It's not that simple. A parent has every right to have standards. A parent has every right to explain to the child what the mahalach in the family is, but there's a much better chance, and how you say it ultimately will make a difference. Are they being rejected, or are they being made part of the family? Famous Ma'aseh against Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. There was a bacher who was caught reading secular books. And they went to Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, they said, we need to throw this guy out of yeshiva. Chaim said he's going to think about it, he's going to talk. At the shmooze, he said, the worst Russia that we know, the Russia of who was out to get Am Yisrael in the worst way was who? Amalek. Amalek has been a thorn in our sides always. What did Amalek, how did Amalek become who he was? His mother wanted to marry into the family of Avram Avinu. And she was rejected and told. Avram Avinu said, no, we're not taking from your family. So she went to Esav thinking that, okay, I'll still be part of the family. However, that rejection went with her and went through to her children. I couldn't say, as Chaim Shmulevitz says it, that Amalek came from the rejection. See what rejection can do. Look at Kamsa Bar Kamsa. See what rejection can do and where it takes someone. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz said, I will never reject a Talmud unless, and he did say, if a person is chayti umachti, if they're doing something wrong and they're bringing other people down, then I have an achrayas to the yeshiva. But kol zman that this child, this bacher, has his own issues that he's working through, I will not reject him because the price of rejection is too high. Now, we have to understand, with all this, we have limitations. Again, like I said, I began by saying that, it would be great. Still going to be the same speech. It'll be great if we could actually control, right? If we had a remote control, make children be the way we want them to be, etc. That, we haven't figured that out yet, although modern science maybe at some point put a little chip in their head, but until then, understanding our limitations often can make us a better parent. What do I mean? There's some issues and handicaps we cannot take away. If a child is struggling in school, there's no way we're going to make them necessarily do better on their tests. Pushing them and getting them tutors and work, etc. Accepting them and realizing and even celebrating the 75 on the test instead of the 90 is how we're making them once again feel part of it. We're not here to change who they are. Every child has certain tchunas hanefesh, and some will be artistic. I have to tell you, it's painful to me. Painful is the wrong word. They'll say it's painful for me that I'm in camp. I don't mean it like that. I'm in camp. What's painful is seeing there are kids that for 10 months a year sit and really are the back of the room, not doing much. They come to life these 2 months because all of a sudden art can be something. Music can be something that in a typical yeshiva curriculum just doesn't exist. It's a wonderful opportunity to see these children who look like they're just, they literally come to life. Now, I'm not suggesting we change the curriculum. I really am, but I can't. Change the curriculum in yeshivas to include some other outside things. But, Lamaisa, giving a child that sense of success is giving them the ability to realize learning. You weren't gebenched with the same cup that everyone was. Not everyone is gebenched to have that. And I have news for you. Very often, you look at some of the biggest people today, they're not the ones who were the straight Aleph and straight A students. They were the ones who worked and worked and worked, but they worked because they wanted to, not because they were forced to. We can't remove the challenge. But what we can do is try to make the environment as pleasant as possible. I can say that I remember growing up, and my father was a realistic man. So we used to get, I think it was $1 for doing good nicely on a test. For some of us, that was whatever it was a 70. It didn't have to be 100. It had to be a 90. So remember the chemistry region, but that's PTSD. I don't want to go into that. But again, there was an understanding that there was a certain expectation. Because ultimately, the best thing we can do for a child is create an environment, not trying to teach them. And an environment is hard because we expect results. When you create an environment, you're not going to see results right away. And not only that, you might see the opposite of results. What do I mean? That the child just gives the same one-word answer, right? What's every parent's nightmare word? Fine. How's everything? Fine. How was your day? Fine. Right? Tells you absolutely nothing other than the fact that this child would rather be anywhere else in the world but having this conversation with you. But don't underestimate the ability to create an environment. And even if they're not showing it, you are creating an environment rather than the frustration and the instruction. And alachas kama v'kama when it comes to Yiddishkeit. We all know, it's a famous, I don't know if we can call it a joke or a kinna for Tisha B'Av, but basically you have kids who grow up where their fathers talk during davening and patch them for talking during davening. So they grow up to talk during davening and patch their kids for talking during davening. Or we can create an environment, there's excitement for mitzvahs, right? There are opportunities. One father was telling me, he says, I don't know, I'm going to do beer chametz early because my kids get too into the fire. Now, this is not pro-pyromaniacs, but It's an opportunity to give a kid a geschmack. Burning chametz is something that it's a mitzvah and he can get involved in. Give people a chance. Take your kids baking matzahs. Do things that are geschmack. When we have opportunities to show, the opposite, unfortunately, is when we say things like flour and water, $70 a pound. Does matzahs make sense? It's not 70 yet, I don't think, but it could be. But the kids hear this, right? I think, it's hard sometimes not to talk about tuition. My wife and I made a cheshbon one time, how much we spent on tuition, starting with my oldest, who's kind of in her 30s, to my youngest, who's in his teens now. We probably could have bought an island. Definitely a Tesla. You know what I'm saying? But not that we ever had a Havamina, but when you start fetching to your kids about tuition, what message are you sending them? The excitement, it's a schus to be able to be spending this money on our children. It's a schus to be buying more tznius clothing. And yes, maybe the Borough Park stores are more expensive. It's not my area of expertise, but it's that ability. I had a Talmud once who unfortunately left school. And my mahalach was that when they left, they were meant that they were in pretty bad shape. I sent a text message every morning, good morning, and a text message every evening, good evening. And after a while, you begin to think that, this is the idea of talking to yourself. Nowadays, talking to yourself is a little bit easier. You put a Bluetooth in, you can talk to yourself. But I just figured, I'm sure he's seeing it, and I kept doing it. At a certain point, I would put in the bottom, from your stalker. Lo and behold, approximately 6 weeks later, I get a response. Thank you, Rebbe. I appreciate that you're keeping in touch. I almost fell over. All right? Fine. So slowly, we started to keep in touch. And I invited him for Shabbos. And my wife's excited. Oh, he's going to come for Shabbos. He's changing. I said, he's not coming for Shabbos. He told you he's coming. The same way it took 6 weeks for him to answer, it's going to be 6 weeks of saying he's coming for Shabbos before he actually comes. Let's see what happens. Sure enough, I'm not feeling so good, Rebbe. I don't think I'm going to make it for Shabbos. Okay, I expected that. So I told him it happened to be that year Purim was on a Sunday. So Tainis Esther was Thursday, and that Erev Shabbos was between Tainis Esther and Shabbos. So I asked him, I said, maybe you want to come for the Purim Suda. Drinking was his thing at that point. I thought maybe, we can get him. So he stops for a second. He goes, wait, Purim is Sunday? I said, yeah, Purim's a Sunday. And he seemed very upset. I said, is there something about that bothers you? And he told me, I can't believe I didn't know Purim was Sunday. I felt like saying there's a lot of other problems to deal with before knowing the calendar that's going on in your life right now. But it just bothered him so much. He kept going on. I'm the son of a Rav. He was. And I didn't even know that Purim was Sunday. I said, okay, come. Anyways, my wife, she be bench, said, something? Let's bring him Shabbos food. Instead of, he's not coming, let's bring him Shabbos food. So I called him up, and I said, I'm coming with Shabbos food. He immediately said, Rebbe, call when you're in front. Don't come upstairs. I said, it's okay. I wouldn't dream of it. I don't want to know what's going on in that apartment. I drive all the way down. It's near Verrazano Bridge, but not like the nice, downtown Brooklyn place. Come out of slum. And I call, and I say, I'm downstairs. You want to come? He says, thank you. I didn't really look at what my wife had packed. So I gave him a bag. I said, this is Shabbos food. And he looks inside, and he bursts out crying. So my initial thought was, I can get you more kugel. I don't know what the issue was. He says, you don't understand. I said, I don't. He told me that he did something we should not do. He made a deal with God. He said, Rabbi Yisroel, I am so far right now. How do I even know I'm your child? Send me a sign. Again, don't try it. But send me a sign that I'm still your son. Because I feel so far right now. And he opens up the bag. I didn't even know. My wife had packed in 2 licht, a becher, one of those disposable bechers. We weren't giving a silver one. Disposable becher, a little thing, grape juice, which we probably had a ton of Erev Purim. 2 challahs and a little challah cover and everything. He says, I asked the Rebbe Shalom, tell me I'm still in the game, and look what you sent me. And he was just blown away. In walks the Puerto Rican mailman. And he looks at me. Atarav? He wasn't Puerto Rican. And I don't know what gave him away that I was a rabbi, but I said, Ken. And he looks at the guy and says, Ata Yehudi? He's a little bit surprised. He said, Ken? Lo yadati, achi. And he gives him a hug. And the kid just lost it completely. Now, luckily I brought my son along, because I got to tell you, if I wouldn't have had my son with me, I don't know if I would have believed the story myself. What an unbelievable, it was a crazy story. And the mailman, him sitting there hugging, the mailman had more tattoos than who knows what, and everything, but he said, Ata achi. And he says, I asked the Rebbeinu Shalom, remind me I'm a Yid. And he sends me a mailman who I see every day, who I've been talking Spanish to, and he said, I'd love to say that this guy is a Rosh Kollel in Bnei Brak right now, but no, Baruch Hashem, it took a little while, but he's doing much, much better. He's from boy, and it was a change. It started with a text. And believe me, I'm not so talented. Anyone could do it. A text, good morning. It's just, I care. And I care, and 6 weeks of you ignoring me is not going to stop me from still doing it. The rest of the stuff, you have to have a wife who knows what to send. But you never know. And that sometimes, I can't make you change, but I can model the right behavior. I can look like a happy Yid, right? Unfortunately, our children don't always see happy Yidden. They see people sometimes who are cross, who are upset, who are angry, they think, and again, maybe it's that mahalach, and I'm not chas v'shalom to judging. There was a generation before us that type of strength worked. And it's not a taina to them, but we have to see that it's not working for this generation, right? A kid who doesn't come home with a vart gets a patch. I mean, these things shouldn't be happening, right? On the other hand, if we can make the Shabbos table geschmack, it's such a game changer. And yes, they're not going to start keeping Shabbos right away. I can't make them succeed, but I can daven for their success. I would say, don't let them know you're davening for them. I had a student come in and say, so I'm not sure what to make of this. Over Yantiv, my mother told me she's davening for this person who's dying, this person who has cancer, and me. So I said, yeah, I mean, she means well, you know, but they don't necessarily need to know you're davening for them, but trust me, you're davening for them. Because ultimately, if a person waters a plant too much, the plant dies. But there's no such thing as too much sun for a plant. We can be the sun. The sun is distant, it's far. It just sends warmth. And you don't realize sometimes what that warmth does. You know, it's interesting. Famously, Reb Ruvain Feinstein and Reb David Feinstein Zatzal often would say, when you talk about so what's the godless of Reb Moshe? I'm sure you've heard the story. Reb Moshe took their clothing and put it on the heater so that it would be hot when they woke up in the morning. It's such a pashut story. It's not like a Gadol Hadar, but it meant so much to them. It's such a simple thing. You wake up your child, you know, and the clothing, you cared that the clothing should be hot. I've heard this by many people. People, Baruch Hashem, have a lot of guests for Shabbos, but people are makbid sometimes that my kids sit next to me. It means a lot to your kids. It means a lot that despite all the guests, my children sit next to me. It's such a small thing, but ultimately it makes a difference. And it's not verbal, right? Son isn't direct. It's not verbal things that we say, it's things that we show, right? Ramesha didn't talk to them about putting the clothes on, he just did it. When you bring home something that a child likes, a nash that he likes, something that you know that they're into, and mind you, even if we're not into it, and there's a 98% chance we're not, right? But we're thinking about them, because we know ultimately that it's important to them. And to realize that even within our communication, to be aware. I think the best marshal is, if anyone learned Eretz Yisrael, if you ever zeicha to a roommate from England, so you understand that two people could be talking English to each other and they're talking two different languages, right? So you're a teenager and you could be talking two different languages to each other. But I explained it to him. You didn't explain it to him in a language that he necessarily understands. Talk to the child in the language that they understand, in a way that they ultimately understand it. And ultimately, the love transcends words. I have had Talmidim over the years who've had parents of one child. So I remember he was a Russian young man, and you know that age where everyone's embarrassed of their parents? Maybe it's only my kids, I don't know. But you come in, you say, Good Shabbos, and they run to the mother, Tati's embarrassing me. I just said Good Shabbos, that's it, right? So here he is at this age. His father comes in, and he's holding on to his father. I said, wow, what does your father do? He said, well, in Russia, it's interesting, you don't necessarily get to choose. He's a professional juggler. So he was. And he was so proud of it. And so I didn't know about why, because you just saw the relationship that the two of them had. And he said, you know why? Because it's so hard for my father here. He does odd jobs so that I should be in yeshiva. And okay, granted, not every child appreciates it. This kid appreciated it. But we also have to understand that the why because I said so doesn't really go right now. We could sit and debate, but it's not about being right. Remember when I was learning how to drive, so my father taught me, one time he said, stop. I said, no, I have the right of way. He said, there's a big sakfaris, people screaming, I have the right of way. It's not about having the right of way. If someone's coming at you, you stop, right? So it's not about having the right. This is not about right or wrong. This is about being successful. Do you want to be right or do you want to be successful? Sometimes, yes, you're right. Your child should be listening to you because you said so and should understand because you said so. That's what's right. But that's not necessarily by pushing that how you're ultimately going to be successful. And the challenge is, how can I talk to you in a language that you're going to understand? Because the emes is, Yiddishkeit used to be almost automatic pilot. I talk for myself, we didn't have things explained to us. We just did, and we didn't ask. And we got beat up by Rebbeim, and we came back in with a smile for more. Nowadays, I don't want to say, but like, if the kid has a math test and a science test on the same day, Hashem Yirachem, what's going to be? Will they make it through and stay on the derech? Like, it's if you don't believe me, check the WhatsApp groups that the parents have. But it's a different world, and we need to understand. So again, we can sit and we can make fun, but Lamaisa is, so they're weak, that it's irrelevant. If people were doing something just because they didn't need to explain, some would say maybe it's the internet has given explanations for things, so now children need explanations. I don't know if it's true, it's not true. But the point is, be aware that maybe they do need to understand things. Maybe they do need an explanation. And even though in the past we didn't, now we do. And Yiddishkeit flourished in the past on what we'll call on culture. Right? Because it was a culture we just did. Right? I didn't have to understand. Miyad, biyad, oich mitoich psoilis. We just did. If our children are asking, they're saying, I'm thinking this through. So we could either say, I'm sorry, this is it's not up for discussion because the Rabbi Shalom said so, and we're right for saying that. Or we could sit down and realize this kid is asking questions, we have an achrayas to answer it, and if for whatever reason we're not the right person to answer it, Baruch Hashem, we live in a world where there are many people who are. But it's kedai to get those answers. A parent needs to show that Yiddishkeit is real in order to be able to give it for our children. We all know the outside world is very empty, but yet it seems to be pulling kids. So us saying the outside world is very empty, that's not the answer to them. In their minds very often is, okay, you just don't get it. You're older, so you don't understand the typhus and this and that, etc. Saying, making fun of the outside world may all be true, but that's not necessarily how you're going. Your child very often will not say, oh, thank you for clarifying that for me. Now that I know that, I will no longer engage in anything in the outside world. If that happens, ashrecha, figure out how it happened and tell it to everyone else because they'd like to hear. On the other hand, just saying it's treif, I remember once hearing from Dr. Shook, a big psychologist here in town, but he says sometimes when we say the words dus is usr, we just say it's usr without anything else. What we basically said is hide it better. Think about that, right? Really, when we have, if we start to explain what the problem is, and it doesn't mean our kids are necessarily going to agree with us. Okay, we can live with that. We have to know how to articulate it. It's not enough to be a role model. We have to really care. And honestly, this is why they say the kibbutzim was a disaster, because children didn't feel the parental role. Right? The kibbutzim, they took kids and they put them apart from the parent. There's something about the parent that has my back. And very often I get a very tough question. A lot of parents say, my son came home with a story about something that happened with his Rebbe. What do? I know I'm supposed to take the Rebbe's side, but I'm not sure in this case. Now, I would never say, put the Rebbe down, or don't, etc. But you owe it to your son to figure it out. 99% of the time, your kid didn't say it over exactly the way it happened. But just the idea, they say when I was growing up, if you came home and said, Rebbe smacked me for no reason, you got a second smack for lying. Right? But again, this should not come out, chas v'shalom, in any way talking negatively about our Rebbeim, but it's understand the kids need to know that you're there. There's a big psychologist, Dr. Gottman. He's one of the greatest things that we could do for our children. It's not in addition to parenting, it is parenting, is what he calls emotional coaching. Emotional coaching is there. We are there for emotional support in any difficult time, whether I understand it or not. Don't try to solve the problem. I tell you from personal experience, when your daughter comes home and says, oh, this friend used to be my friend, but now she's not my friend. So if you understand that, you have the keys, and you probably have a great marriage because you understand women. But most of us have no idea what that means. Because if it's a boy, okay, so don't be their friend. Okay, Ty, you're right, I won't be their friend. Yeah. So I immediately told my daughter when she came home, she doesn't want to walk home. I'm going to call their father. Don't do that, okay? So I'm going to call the school. Don't, Ty, let's just wait till mommy comes home, okay? And I realized, stop trying to solve the problem. Just tell her how bad you feel that she's in pain over this. And even if you don't understand why she's in pain over this, it's irrelevant. Just be with them. That's what emotional coaching are. If you think about it for a moment, the best Rebbeim that we had, that we look back at the best Rebbeim, were not necessarily the greatest Bali Masber, right? They were the ones who cared the most about us. And it's true. When I thought about this, it's really true. Again, not just every Rebbe, Baruch Hashem, really cares. I had a Rebbe, I remember, so in the yeshiva that I was in, it was at a point where there was some older European Rebbeim and some American Rebbeim. And I don't know, but I wanted the American Rebbeim. I was an English speaker, and I figured it's good if I understand the language my Rebbe is speaking. And I ended up with one of the European Rebbeim who did not even speak English. And I thought this is going to be an end of a year. 2 weeks in, he comes over to me, Grossberg. He noticed, and I understood this, you don't eat breakfast. That's not okay. You need to eat breakfast every day. And it hit me, just because he's European, that doesn't mean he doesn't care. And I ended up having a great relationship with him. Yes, it was different than a Rebbe who was like with it and geschmack and whatever else. But he truly cared. He knew when I was eating breakfast. He knew when I wasn't eating breakfast. And he wanted to know what we were having for lunch. And he cared. When you're going home for Shabbos, I was from not in Brooklyn, so getting out was hard with rides. He would ask me every Erev Shabbos if I had a ride home. Nothing he could necessarily do to help me about it, but he cared. Didn't speak English, but he cared. What does one thing have to do with the other? The greatest Rebbeim, if we think back, are not necessarily the ones who explained the Gemara the best, but they were the ones who gave us the most emotional support. And emotional support has to be all-encompassing. It can't be just when I feel like it, or just when it hits me right. We don't get to pick and choose when we care. Because, like I said, I might not necessarily care that you don't have someone walking you home, but that doesn't make a difference. That's irrelevant. I don't have that right. If it's important to my child, it has to be important to me, whether I understand it, whether I don't understand it. Acknowledge the feeling. If you can understand, you are upset. Now, it might sound so basic, but again, very often we're problem solvers, which is a wonderful thing, but it's not always about solving the problem. It's about being there for the child. I'm really with you, and I really see you. And sometimes that's hard because, again, there's something about children, not all, many of them, they test us, they push us. And on top of that, we have to go and be there for them. But that's what a parent is. That's what we signed up for. Ultimately, it's not about us. It's not about getting something back. Well, I didn't get back. We don't talk that way. Well, we shouldn't. And it's not about the acceptance, rather, is not about fully agreeing. A kid comes home and says, I have no friends, right? So you're going to sit and start naming the people who you think are their friends. That's not what they want to hear. They want to hear it must be so tough not to have friends, right? You know they have friends, but that's irrelevant. That's not what they want to hear at that point. We can notice things, small things that are important to them. It's not be important to you. Right? You're looking and wondering, when in the world did spending that much money on a knapsack become a thing? If not you, at least me. But it doesn't mean you don't compliment your kid on the wonderful knapsack that they have, that they should know they're going to be keeping for the next 5 years. But yeah. we have to be practical. I can't tell you how many times parents come to me and they say, why won't my child speak to me? And I talk to them for 10 minutes. I said, it's very poshut. I wouldn't speak to you either. Sorry, babe, that wasn't nice, but you know, I'm saying you're so judgmental. You say, why are your child speaking to you? Because it's just not worth it. When they try to get you to understand what they're going through, you tell them they're nourish. When you try to get them to understand why they're having a hard time in class, they should be trying harder. When you try, it keeps going. So why aren't they speaking? Be someone they want to speak to. Again, don't be their friend. Just to clarify, I'm not in favor. Don't be their friend. Don't give in. Don't always say that they're right. We can try to explain things differently to them, 100%. But at the same time, realize that we want to be there for them. We want them to know that we're there for them. And ultimately, when you know that there's a certain, especially, we live in scary times. And I don't necessarily mean what's going on in the world, etc., but kids have a natural, there was a time where maybe people didn't know what was going on in the world. I have to tell you, one of the most amazing things about being in camp is I don't know what's going on in the world. Don't tell me, please. I'm going to go back up and pretend I don't know. But it's a scary world sometimes we live in. If a child feels that their parent is there for them, they need that, and it doesn't have to be just a little kid. It could be a teenager also. Chinuch for teenagers is very difficult. A child knows what it is to be a child. An adult knows mostly what it is to be an adult. A teenager is not a child, and he's not an adult. They think sometimes they're an adult, but they want to be treated like a kid because they still want to get the allowance or whatever it is to be a kid. It's very difficult for us and understand what they're navigating. They themselves don't know. The choices that they have now are choices we didn't have. I once asked, I shouldn't say this publicly, but this is on the video now. I once asked Rabbi Yisroel Solomon Zatzal, am I allowed to say to my Talmidim that if I was growing up in this door, I don't know if I would have made it? We didn't have the Yetzer Haras that they have now. It's crazy to think what's available to a child in the palm of their hand. He said, yeah, let them understand that you appreciate how difficult it is for them. The kids are growing up with things that with uncertainty and nisyanis that we Pasha didn't even know about. Open conversations are so important, not judgmental conversations. That doesn't mean agreeing with everything, but the second you're showing judgment, the child will shut down and you almost can't blame them. They need to feel that you're capable of hearing. Not that you're agreeing, but that you're capable ultimately of hearing. And Rabbi say, at the end of the day, the best reward is praise. And the best news is, it doesn't cost anything. Praise is an amazing thing. Right? I said, what? Praise them. What'd they do already? They cleaned their room? They're supposed to clean their room. Right? I still remember years ago, I was in camp, and we had to hand in what was called a bonus card. Why we felt we deserved a bonus. So I remember writing, I showed up on time to everything. I was by every meal. I made sure the room was clean. And I got back, that was your job. That's not what you get a bonus for. Now, we can sit and debate if that's true or not. I don't know. But the bottom line is, now, Bisman Hazeh, that praise is, I hold of you. And not only that, I hold of you even if you're not exactly the way I had in mind and planned that you can be. I understand, and Rabbi say, find something. I have to tell you that we recently had visiting day, so I realized over the years you have to be a little bit more explicit with the counselors. Sometimes we say, like, always try to say something nice. So a parent came to me and said, did you tell them to say something nice? I said, yeah, why? Well, he started off by saying that my son sleeps well. So, okay, you got to come with something better than that, but of course, everyone knows everyone's favorite report card comment is, Shlomi has great potential. There's a huge but coming after that. But a real compliment. A real compliment also means that I noticed what you did. Now, there's shilas, and it's not poshut. Let's say, do you compliment something that you don't agree with? Your child is dressed in a way that you're not okay with. Do you compliment that? I would say no. Now, again, you have to know where, when. But when you find something that you can compliment them on, go to town. Make a big deal of it. Let them see that you do ultimately understand. Because Ezo Chacham Haroya Es Hanoilad. It's not about today. It's about the rest of your life. And the idea over here isn't, I'm not going to change you today. My goal is not to change you today. My goal is to engage you today. My goal is to make you feel that we are one today. What will happen afterwards, I can just tell you, we have a much better chance of success if we can accomplish that today. What will be tomorrow, we'll work on tomorrow. Right? Some people are afraid, but then they'll get the idea that I approved it. Don't worry so much. The idea over here is ultimately that they should feel. I'll end a couple of quick thoughts, try to get through. It's not Torah any time where you could just put me on double speed to get finished, right? I always say that whoever it was that figured out how to do like voice notes, double speed is going straight to Gan Eden. Along with the person who figured out how to make climate control different on two sides of the car. Okay, anyways. But when we come to parenting, sometimes we need to leave our stuff at the door. We might not be willing to admit it right away, but sometimes it's our own personal things that are getting involved. And we have to be willing to take an honest look at ourselves. Is this really bothering me because of what my child is doing it? Or is this bothering me because what my neighbor thinks? I feel like a failure. You're not a failure. You're a parent who's working with a child, and fakert, by putting in this avodah, not only not a failure, you can be a superstar. It's not easy, it's not simple, but something that ultimately that can be done. But we need to take ourselves out of the equation. And when our children see that we do that, one parent once told me, I had a parent from Eretz Yisrael who wanted to come visit their child. The child was struggling terribly. And I asked them, and the mother said, should I come or not? I said, can you walk down Avenue J with your child the way she is now? She said, let me think about it. She called me and said, I can't. I just can't. She said, the fear of running into someone I know is too great. I said, don't come. It's going to be too much for you. You're not going to accomplish anything. And she came a year later when she was ready to do it. Now, I'm not saying that's what made, Baruch Hashem, this story had a happy ending, kid did fine, she's a Reish Koil and B'nai Brak. No, whatever, she's doing fine now. I'm not saying it's because the mother walked out, but that acceptance, zicha, made a difference. Be careful how you say it. Sometimes I complimented them. I said, oh, now you look good. That's saying yesterday you didn't, right? Again, there's so many different things. We can go on and on of different ways that of understanding and of ways that we can do. I just recently had a parent told me a Maisa that they got all upset. Their daughter at the table said, dessert is disgusting. Father got so upset and really told the child, how do you say that in front of mommy? Turns out the daughter made the dessert. Okay? So it's a little different when she said about the dessert that she made. The father didn't have that information, though. When you're missing information, it's a problem. Rabbi Deutsch is looking at me. I see I have 9 more seconds. But tzaddik katomo yifroich. Right? Why is the tzaddik compared? Because dates take a long time to grow. We have to be in it for the long run. We have to be in it for the long game. Rabbi, I can tell you, though, that holding stark and making them feel part of things and making them feel that you care and that regardless of how far or wherever it is that they are, again, we're not even talking off the derech, but just they're not exactly you. They're not exactly what you had in mind. That ultimately is what holds them in. Kol zman that they feel a part of things, they will be a part of things. Don't think for a moment, don't lose sight of how important your approval is to your child. Even if they're talking to you in a certain way that makes it they couldn't care less. I promise you they care. That approval can mean ultimately everything. We have to hang on. We have to daven. And the Rebbe should always all give us kayach and siyata d'shmaya to parent successfully. Thank you.
Shem Egenshir, Thomas, Boston, like a big Ashikar to Rabbi Grossberg for the inspiring drasha. I'd like to give a big Ashikar to Rabbi Aaron Wolfson for sponsoring tonight's Sheilu Nishmas Oviv, Rav Zeb, Beram Avram, Mashal, and regular yard site. I'd like to give a big Ashikar to Mati Zilberberg for support. Tonight's in honor of Rabbi Grossberg and Lila Nishmas, Aaron Avda, Beram Menachem Av Levi, and Aisha Henya, Bas Rabbi Yaakov Yehuda, Aleim HaSholem. To have the great sisters supporting Egenshir Torah, sponsoring a share, or to take part in the journal being published for Egenshir Torah's annual dinner, upcoming in just 2 weeks, and support our Botzas HaTorah worldwide of Egenshir Torah throughout the year. Call 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Shkach to everyone for coming. Chananya ben Akash Emor Tzagash Baruch Hu L'Zakis, as Yisrael Figure Hebel Am Torah Mitzvah Shenem Adonai Chofetz Aman Tzidka Yagdol Torah V'Yader.